The Committee on Homeland Security, Subcommittee on Transportation and Protective Security will come to order. Before I commence with my statement, I do want to note for the record how happy I am to have Ms. Watson-Coleman as my new ranking chair on this. We have a very good working relationship as well, and we should, and I think it's something more people in Congress could try and do. And we're going to endeavor to do that going forward. So, Ms. Watson-Coleman, welcome, and thank you for being on the committee with me.
Thank you. Delighted to be here with you.
And thank you for being here as well, Mr. Payne. There's others in the committee. They have some conflicts, so maybe coming in and out, but we'll deal with that as we move forward. The subcommittee is meeting today to examine how TSA can better achieve its mission to secure transportation systems across the United States. In addition, the hearing will cover opportunities for TSA to improve as it relates to technological advances and communications with its state, local, and private sector partners. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Subcommittee on Transportation and Protective Security's first hearing of the 115th Congress, which gave us added responsibilities to have oversight of the Secret Service as well as TSA. So we got kind of doubled our workload here, much to the chagrin of my staff. I'm grateful to my constituents for giving me the opportunity and privilege to return to Congress and continue to chair this important subcommittee. This committee has a proven track record of working together to advance long-term common sense and strategic reforms to the Department of Homeland Security. While there may be divisions and discord elsewhere, here in this room, we all share an unshakable commitment to ensuring the security of the traveling public, because we know that the consequences of failure are just too great. The Transportation Security Administration was founded just weeks after 9/11. Congress did what it does best. It reacted to a crisis and, unfortunately, threw a lot of money at it without sometimes thinking about the overall structure. Here we are nearly 16 years later. The American taxpayer has spent billions of dollars, and it is clear that TSA is long overdue for an overhaul. The agency has been plagued with uncertainty and a lack of consistent leadership. Since 2014, TSA has had 6 different administrators leading the agency, 6. While we have been able to advance legislation to address many of the challenges that TSA faces, it is incumbent upon us to provide clearer direction and intent for this often troubled agency in the form of a full-scale reauthorization and find a way to limit the revolving door of leadership. Without continuity at the top, it is impossible for any organization to successfully implement a long-term strategic vision. Instead, we have all been left with the many fits and starts of the last few years. Now, juxtapose that with, for example, the FBI, an agency where the director is there for a 10-year term, and how the stability really helps moving forward. Under former Administrator Neffinger, TSA began to move in the right direction. A new training and education program was put into place for all frontline employees. Emphasis was placed on engagement with the private sector, and TSA launched an innovation task force to seek out new technologies. All of these things had a very positive effect on morale, at least to some extent. While these were important first steps, they did not go far enough. And now many of these potentially transformative initiatives are left to languish or disappear altogether with yet another change in leadership when the President names a new administrator. It would be wise for the new administrator to continue to build upon many of these positive changes initiated by Admiral Neffinger. When confirmed, he or she will have an eager partner in this subcommittee to help garner congressional support for reform and improvement within the agency. Over the last few years, we saw record-breaking numbers of Americans traveling. Unfortunately, TSA was, at times, ill-prepared for the volume of travelers and was caught flat-footed. At the height of the wait time crisis last summer, news coverage around the country showed passengers stranded at airports overnight due to long TSA wait lines, sleeping on cots or on the floor. The number of passengers will continue to increase, and we must ensure TSA is prepared to effectively and efficiently screen passengers. Simultaneously, TSA must focus on working with its state and local partners to keep all areas of our airports safe and secure. This issue was front and center on January 7th when a disturbed individual opened fire in the baggage claim area at the Hollywood-Fort Lauderdale International Airport, resulting in the loss of 5 lives and scores of injuries. Air traffic was brought to a halt as law enforcement officials and first responders rushed to contain the situation. This tragic incident served as a stark reminder of the threats facing our nation's aviation system. Although TSA is one of the youngest agencies in the federal government, It has come to operate as an entrenched federal bureaucracy. This means that oftentimes it fails to achieve important efficiencies, and it lacks the flexibility to respond to an ever-changing threat landscape. I believe that with the start of this new administration, we have a unique opportunity to affect positive change at TSA. The purpose of our hearing today is to look forward, not backwards, forward, and we will hear from the many willing and ready partners TSA has to help inform us what innovations and efficiencies TSA could better leverage to enhance its ability to achieve its critical mission. The private sector is a primary engine of innovation and efficiency in the U.S. economy. The Department of Homeland Security and TSA must look to them for best practices and new technologies that can simultaneously improve aviation security and passenger experience. I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses today on the specific reforms necessary to advance TSA and make the traveling public safer. And with that, I am pleased to recognize a new ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentle lady from New Jersey, Ms. Watson Coleman, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Katko. I really do appreciate this opportunity to work with you, and I look forward to working in a bipartisan way to ensure that we have efficiency, effectiveness, and a robust traveling economy that benefits from the things that we shall do together. I want to thank you for convening this hearing. At the outset, let me say that I am looking forward to working with the Transportation and Protective Security Committee to address those challenges within all modes of transportation. The Transportation Security Administration, as well as airlines, airports, and other stakeholders, have experienced major challenges recently in regard to aviation security. While there have been many lessons learned and improvements made to aviation security, there is much to be done in this area. Mr. Dow, I understand that the U.S. Travel Association has taken time to produce a plan for the future of aviation security, and I look forward to hearing your perspective on how we can enhance security while facilitating an efficient experience for travelers. I also look forward to your perspective on ensuring that the aviation security fee, which is currently diverted to offsetting the deficit, is utilized as a resource for enhancing aviation security, the purpose for which it was originally introduced. Ms. Brooks, I look forward to hearing the perspective of aviation security stakeholders around the world through your expertise as head of security for Airports Council International. Aviation security is a global issue, and your exposure to technology and diverse security policies through the Smart Security Initiative will add great value to this hearing. President Cox, I thank you for being here today. In 2016, TSO screened more than 738 million passengers, 466 million checked bags, and discovered more than 3,300 firearms in carry-on bags. However, when issues arise at the nation's checkpoints, such as lengthy wait times associated with the recent peak travel season, or reported high failure rates from covert testing, transportation security officials usually bear the brunt of the traveling public's frustration. Eventually, we learned that a multitude of factors can contribute to these issues, including but not limited to technology, policies, and management, not just transportation security officers. I thank TSOs for working day in and day out to ensure that no weapon or person with ill intent is able to harm us via our commercial aviation system. I look forward to your testimony about disparities between the rights of these federal employees in comparison to those in the other workforce. As we discuss the future of TSA and transportation security, we cannot leave out the perspectives of those that you represent. I also believe that this subcommittee must convene a hearing on this topic that also includes the perspective of the agency whose future we are discussing, the Transportation Security Administration. Lastly, year after year, the funding for the aviation sector is multiples higher than the funding for the surface sector. My district has extensive rail infrastructure, including Amtrak's Northeast Corridor, as well as both freight and commuter trains that run through it and are extremely important to my constituents. Given the attacks on trains in Brussels, in which a metro train was the subject of a bombing that killed and injured travelers, as well as the attempted attack on a high-speed train traveling from Amsterdam to Paris, We must ensure that discussions of the future of TSA and transportation security also incorporate other modes of transportation, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to engaging in those opportunities with you. Those who wish to do American citizens harm will continue to attempt to exploit soft targets, and we must shore up vulnerabilities that exist throughout all transportation systems. Once again, I thank all witnesses for appearing before us today and look forward to your testimony. With that, I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Watson-Coleman. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We are very pleased to have a distinguished panel here to testify before us today on this very important topic. And the idea of having you here is to hear from you the concerns you have before we find out who the new administrator is, so that when that administrator gets here, he'll know that we have a game plan as to what we'd like to do to help them address some of their issues. Our first witness, Mr. Roger Dow, serves as a president and chief executive officer for the U.S. Travel Association. Prior to joining U.S. Travel in 2005, Mr. Dow had a 34-year career at Marriott International, and most notably, Mr. Dow served in the United States Army with the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam, where he received the Bronze Star and other citations. That's something I think about often these days, as my son is beginning his career in the Army, in the infantry, after graduating from college as an officer. So I'm going to be swearing him into the Army as an officer in May, and that's going to be a high honor for me, but also high fear, as you might imagine. Our second witness, Ms. Nina Brooks, has been the head of Security at Airports Council International in Montreal since 2015. She has worked in the aviation industry for many years and started her aviation career at Virgin Atlantic Airways. In addition to her current role, Ms. Brooks also teaches aviation security at McGill University, a truly fine institution, and is a member of the editorial board of Aviation Security International. And I'm hoping at some point she invites me up to Montreal to see a hockey game, because I'm a hockey nut, so I'd be happy to come up. Our third witness is Mr. Cox, J. David Cox, the National President of the American Federation of Government Employees, whom we know well. Mr. Cox was first elected president of AFGE in August of 2012 and was reelected to a second three-year term in August of 2015. I've had many conversations with your group, and I always find them fruitful, productive, and helpful, so I applaud you for that. And thank you all for being here today, and I now recognize Mr. Dow for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Kotko, and thanks to your son for what he's about to do. And Ranking Member Watson-Coleman, I'm a Jersey boy, so I grew up in Jersey, so my heart's there, and good to be with you. And member of the committee, I thank you for allowing us to testify. U.S. Travel, I'm talking on behalf of U.S. Travel, which represents the entire of the travel industry, which is $2.1 trillion of our economy and 15.1 million jobs, 1 in 9 jobs. Our mission is simple: to get more people traveling to the United States and within the United States. We've been driving the national discussion on aviation security and traveler security for a decade now, and have worked with every one of the administrators and look forward to working with the next administrator. And we have a belief that greater security and increased travel are mutually compatible goals. And I also believe that without security, there is no travel, period. And so this is why this is so important. 5 years ago, we made a recommendation to the TSA of several points that we believe could take place. Last month, we issued an update of that report, and I was pleased that the chairman was with us as we rolled it out, and also with us was Member Keating. It was an event at roll call where we talked about items that I'll get to that can really make a difference here. It's very important with the new Congress and the dawn of a new administration that we really make sure that we're doing the right thing for the safety of Americans. We're pleased to offer many policy recommendations here, and we're going to suggest a new series of reforms that we think are very important, and to give the American people the best return on the investment that we're making in our country's security at the airports. We recognize TSA has a mission that is critical to detect and deter any threats, and the challenge you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, of the 750 million people that go through airports every year. It's complex, it's expensive, and it's extremely important. Recognize that TSA has made many good moves, but we think there is more that can be done. As you mentioned, with the long lines and all that, there's been some perceived failures. There have been real failures, but also a perception that those lines could make it difficult to travel. We've done some research that shows that Americans would take 2 or 3 more trips if they felt they could get through an airport efficiently. But when they think there's big lines, they avoid the trip and they make a telephone call, and it's not nearly as effective as we know as face-to-face. We know there's many challenges the TSA has faced over the past 5 years, and we think a lot of work remains. Some of the ideas that we put forward, I'd like to work of 15 recommendations, but I'd like to focus on just a few of those in our report, Transforming Security at Airports, an update on progress in the future of aviation security. First is fee diversion, and you mentioned that. It's so important. What's basically happened is the fees went up by $1.6 million, and but the decision was made to keep the amount of money going to TSA at TSA, and that overflow would go to the general fund. And we are strong believers that that 1/3 of fees should go to TSA and to improve TSA. And Congress should stop diverting funds and put those fees towards staffing, technology, equipment, et cetera. The next way is the best way to really ensure this is trusted traveler programs. And we all know that PreCheck and the Global Entry Program are very effective. But when it comes to those programs, I talk about the 4 Ps. One is the process. We've got to get the ability to sign people up efficiently, and I don't think we need to have 2 forms of ID. I can get on any plane, any airport with 1 form of ID, but we can do things like that to get people signed up. Promotion. If 10 million people signed up, it'd be $850 million. In the private sector, if we had an opportunity to get these people signed up, we would put money towards promoting it and getting people to sign up. We would also look at price. When you look at price, if it's $85 to a businessman, that's not much. But if you take a company that signs up several thousand people, we should figure out a way to get a volume discount. For a family of 4, that's $320. So we should think about what we can do, and making it a priority is very important. Next area we want to focus on is innovative technology. We've got to not just talk about technology, but we've got to put it in place and spend the money to do so. And last place is empower the airports and the private sector to really help, and SPP, which is basically the Secure Partnership Program, to really help bring more innovative ideas, better security. And we're extremely interested in this. This committee is doing extraordinarily important work. And as I say, once again, without security, there is no travel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your testimony. And I have many questions to ask you when the time comes, but I appreciate that. Now, I now recognize Ms. Nina Brooks for her testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Katko, Ranking Member Watson-Coleman, and members of the subcommittee. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to provide a perspective from the Airports Council International, the global trade representative of the world's airports, on the advancements in airport security, screening practices, and in particular the Smart Security Project. Recognizing the challenges of growing passenger numbers, continuously evolving security threats, and limited resources, ACI and our airline partners at the International Air Transport Association joined forces in 2013 to define a future for passenger and cabin baggage screening, where passengers proceed through security with minimal inconvenience, where security resources are allocated based on risk, and where airport facilities are optimized. Today, this vision has been widely recognized throughout the world by airports, airlines, and regulators. An increasing number of airports around the world are implementing measures and processes recommended by the Smart Security Program. The objectives of the program are threefold. Firstly, to deliver strengthened security through a focus on risk, better use of existing technologies, and the introduction of advanced detection capabilities. Secondly, to increase the operational efficiency of a checkpoint, including faster throughput, better use of equipment, reduced cost per passenger, and the best use of space and staff. And finally, to improve passenger and staff experience through reduction in queues and waiting times, reduced manual handling, and better use of technology for less intrusive and less time-consuming security screening. Although focused on the screening checkpoint, Smart Security also benefits the security at an airport as a whole, particularly through the reduction in queues and crowds in public areas. The Smart Security Program is structured through trials, tests, and information sharing. Airports, regulators, and airlines have worked together to test different technologies and processes and have shared their findings with the project team in order to produce a set of best practices or guidance material. This, in turn, is shared with the wider community so that all can benefit from the experience of participants in the project. There's no one solution for all airports. Instead, the project has identified a number of components that can be implemented depending on the regulatory requirements, the needs, facilities, and the risk profile of the airport. For this reason, there's not one smart checkpoint that can be used as an exact model, rather a menu of options that can be combined to meet requirements. Smart security has demonstrated significant improvements in operational efficiency, passenger satisfaction, and security value. To give you some examples, some of the components deployed include centralized image processing or remote screening to enable X-ray machines to be networked and images viewed away from the checkpoint location or across lanes. Trials have demonstrated significant efficiency improvements, and some airports have seen increases in image throughput as well as reductions in total passenger processing times by an average of 30 seconds per passenger. Checkpoint environment and management enhancements include greater automation, for example, tray handling systems, resource optimization such as parallel divesting, and automated checkpoint performance monitoring solutions. Using these, some airports have reported a flow increase of up to 20%. And some airports have implemented a completely new look and feel at checkpoints, such as Amsterdam Schiphol, which is designed to provide a calmer, more passenger-friendly environment for travelers to divest and then be reunited with their possessions. This reimagined checkpoint benefits the passenger experience, but also aids the detection of suspicious behavior. Using full-body scanners for passenger screening is also demonstrated to provide effective security while improving the passenger experience and reducing the need for full manual searches. Airports that have taken part in trials include Amsterdam Schiphol, Dublin, Doha, Melbourne, London Heathrow, Gatwick and Manchester, and many others. Many have implemented components. For example, the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority has installed new automated lanes in Montreal and Calgary, and automated lanes are beginning to be deployed here in the United States, using many of the same principles recommended by smart security, such as lane automation, parallel divesting, and tray return systems. Looking forward, the focus for the coming year will be on technologies such as computed tomography, advances in standoff trace detection, queue management, passenger tracking, identity management, and differentiated screening according to risk. Some of the key enablers for smart security have been the outcome-focused regulation, flexibility in checkpoint design and configuration, understanding that not all airports and risk profiles are the same, adequate funding for staffing, screening technology, and research and development, along with efficient processes for testing and evaluation of new technologies. In the United States, we've been working with TSA towards sharing of information from the implementation of the automated screening lanes at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, which implement a number of these smart security best practices, and we've also had some very constructive discussions with the TSA's Innovation Task Force. We believe that there's a great deal of opportunity here in the United States to benefit from the lessons learned by smart security and vice versa, and we look forward to working further with TSA and more US airports. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. I also look forward to the discussion moving forward. And I hear you loud and clear, both Mr. Dow and Ms. Brooks, about the technological aspects. We've been beating that drum since we started on this committee that TSA is behind the curve in technology. And I'll just tell you a brief example I had last year. I had to go to Ireland for work, and it was really a struggle, of course. But we went through England. And the use of biometrics in England were stunning. You walk up, you stand in front of it before when they check your passport, and you do a facial recognition scan in about 1 second. And then when I went to go check into the gate, when I was checking in to go on the airplane, you did it again. And it matched the facial recognition from the person who came in to the person who got on the airplane. They have technology like this all over the world, and it's maddening to me that we don't have it here. So I'm going to definitely explore that with you moving forward. But of course, all the technology in the world will be useless if you don't have the right personnel doing the job. So that's why I'm looking forward to hearing Mr. Cox's testimony. So I now recognize Mr. Cox for his testimony.
Mr. Chairman, welcome back, and AFG is so excited to have you back as chair of the subcommittee. And to Ranking Member Watson Coleman, congratulations on your new post, and Congressman Payne, it is always so good to be with you. And Mr. Dow, and the chairman's son, and all men and women who are serving in the military and all veterans, we owe them a debt of gratitude for their service to this country. And I would remind everyone the 40,000 transportation security officers that work for TSA that AFGE proudly represents, over 31% of them are also veterans that have served this country and continue to serve this country by keeping all of us safe and secure. Every member of Congress travels home to their district. They travel back to conduct hearings and to hold votes, and they do it safely because of the great work of TSOs. Airline pilots and flight attendants travel safely right now all over this country because these men and women are protecting us and keeping us safe. And my main message today is that no discussion of the future of TSA should ever exclude the voices of the TSO workforce. TSOs are the eyes, ears, and hands of TSA at the checkpoints and the baggage areas of our nation's airport. They are the most visible of TSA's components and most likely to be blamed for perceived failures on the part of the agency. They are rarely, if ever, recognized for a job well done. The best way for Congress and TSA to show its appreciation for TSO's contributions to national security would be fair treatment on the job. Second, we ask that Congress ensure TSOs have the resources necessary to carry out the agency's mission, such as appropriate and proper equipment. And finally, we ask that Congress hold TSA accountable for both of these priorities. Security screening of passengers and baggage was made a direct federal government responsibility after a national examination of aviation security following 9/11. That examination found that fatal security lapses were due in no small part to the fact that screening contractors operated with too little oversight. The screeners they hired had little training, did not understand operating procedures, high turnover, and very low pay. For 15 years, TSOs have kept America safe from terrorism and other risks. They have got the job done and done it very effectively. Their record is one that we should all applaud. TSOs seized over 3,300 firearms, most of them loaded at checkpoints. And they defied all projections this past summer with long wait lines due to understaffing and made it happen throughout this country. Yet there are some politicians who believe that we should privatize TSA. Make no mistake, privatization through the Screening Partnership Program takes us back to pre-9/11 conditions. The future of TSA lies with civil servants, TSOs, and not private contractors. TSOs sign up for their job because they want to serve the American public by keeping our air travel safe. In return, they have every right to expect fair treatment from their employer, the federal government. TSOs have the workplace policies changed every time there is a new administrator, and we have had more than our fair share, sir. Each time we go through many changes of all working conditions. AFG recently ratified a new contract with the agency. Many of the terms and conditions of employment were changed unilaterally without any input from Congress or from the union that represents those employees. I certainly believe the one thing that we could do that would help TSOs is to grant them Title V rights under the U.S. Code. This would prevent discrimination. It would give them full collective bargaining rights. And I'd certainly like to salute Senator Schatz, Warren, Merkley, and others who have introduced legislation in the Senate, and it is our understanding that Ranking Member Benny Thompson and Congresswoman Nita Loy will be introducing legislation in the House for Title V rights for TSOs. And thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for having us today, and we look forward to taking any questions, and it's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. And you make a very good point. The frontline folks are rarely recognized at TSA for a job that they do a day in and day out, and it's a very difficult job trying to find a proverbial needle in the haystack every time. And it's remarkable that they found 3,300 guns last year. It's also deeply troubling that they found 3,300 guns. But every day they get up and go to work, and they, have the pressure of the safety of the traveling public in their hands. And so I definitely want to commend them for their work, and I thank them for the work. And our job is not only to support them, but try to make their job as easy as possible. And it's clear to me, and we'll have more discussion about this, that the technology is lacking in this country compared to the rest of the world. And it's kind of like asking someone to go fight a battle with bow and arrows when your adversaries have more sophisticated weapons. I mean, we have to give them better tools to work with and better working conditions under which to work. So that's the tension we have in these days of limited budgets. But finding the efficiencies and finding ways to make them better is what we need to do. And again, I applaud them for all their efforts, and please extend that to them for me. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. And I think I want to start with, there's so much to ask you. We may do a second round here if time permits. But just quickly, Mr. Dow, you mentioned that the average traveler would take 2 to 3 more trips a year if the experience in traveling was better than it is today. I would probably take more trips too if the seats were a little bit bigger, because being a tall person, it's brutal, especially when someone puts a seat back in front of you. So I can't even sit up straight hardly in those seats. But did you do any sort of a calculation as to what the economic impact would be of those 2 to 3 more trips per year? Just ballpark figures that you could get to us?
Ballpark, $85 billion.
Billion.
888,000 jobs. And what we're finding is people, when it gets to be an hour flight that might be a 3 or 4 hour drive, they're driving. And that creates another problem, puts all the people on the road. So there's no question about it. Travelers, anything that gets in their way impedes them from wanting to travel. So this is so critical to get people through efficiently and safely.
Right, and I appreciate that. Now, moving forward, there does seem to be a virtual certainty that the amount of additional travelers per year is going to explode in this country and indeed around the world. Now, what if you could comment for me, based on what your projections and your experiences are, whether we're ready for it, number one, from an infrastructure standpoint, but also from a processing standpoint?
We're absolutely not ready for it. Right now, we've gone in the past 5 years from 55 million international travelers, domestic travel up to 77 million. Domestic travelers are going up 3 and 4% a year. So we're going to get to a point that 750 million travelers is going definitely to be 1 billion travelers. And when that happens in a short time, we are not ready for it. Our airports, we don't have the facilities, the screening areas, the technology. It will be a mess, and it will impede the growth of the economy and jobs. So there's no question, and that's going to be upon us before we know it. This is not a 10-year problem. This is a 5-year problem.
What do you see as TSA's greatest hurdles that they need to clear in order to make it ready for that challenge?
I think the greatest hurdles, is you've heard it several times, is to be able to have technology to make sure that the TSOs are doing the mission-critical jobs versus standing there and watching someone exit the airport that someone else could do if they try to go the wrong way. There's many jobs that we have got these well-trained people, and we've got to get them really utilize their talents and find other ways. And the lady next to me talked about trace things. There's a lot of things we can do, but TSA has to get technology, has to get efficiency, and has got to get more people in pre-check. Trusted Traveler Program is critical.
I agree with that, and I think that we've made great strides with that, but there's much more we need to do. In Syracuse, my airport, for example, we put in, they used to have to travel to Oswego, New York, 45 minutes away on a not a very good road, just to go to the port of Oswego to see the Border Patrol to get yourself on a pre-clearance, which is insane. So I had them put a kiosk at the airport. Now we have close to 50% of the travelers coming out of Syracuse in pre-check, which is amazing. And it's completely changed the burden on the TSO officers, the TSA officers, as well as the overall enjoyable experience for the public. So there's so much more we can do, and I'm probably going to follow up again with more questions if I have time here. But I thank you for that, and there's so much more we need to talk about, but technology is key, and that's why, Ms. Brooks, I would like to ask you some questions. The SSP program, obviously, there's there's many initiatives and what have you, but it just seems like when you travel internationally at some of the airports, like Schiphol, for example, or some of the others that in Europe, that the technology is light years ahead of ours. So what do you see as the biggest technological drawbacks we have here in the United States that critically need to be addressed?
Well, I think some of the things that we're starting to see in the automated lanes are actually making great strides towards actually getting greater throughput at checkpoints. And
That being the automated lanes being the
the tray return,
trails.
yeah, but there's a lot more that can be done with that. The tray return is very visible, but there's a lot that can be done with actually automating threat detection and actually putting some intelligence into the machines themselves. Then that coupled with, I mentioned centralized image processing, that's networking the checkpoints so that you can actually have a continuous flow of images provided to the screening officers. We've seen a great deal of efficiency gained from that. And then actually, through networking the checkpoints, you can also get a lot of efficiency in terms of understanding the throughput and getting some good management information from the checkpoints to enable you to better deploy your resources. We talked about biometrics a little bit. I think that for the future is going to be absolutely critical. We talk a lot about screening according to risk, but if you don't know who the person is that you've got in front of you and who you're screening, then you can't do that. So I think that's going to be a very, very important piece, being able to say that this bag in this tray belongs to this person, and I know who this person is, and I know that they're supposed to be here going through this checkpoint and traveling today. That's a piece that really is missing right now. And it's being worked on all over the world. I don't think anybody's quite cracked that nut yet, but it's something that we really need to be working on.
We have really been on TSA over the last couple of years. We've had 18 subcommittee hearings, which is, I think, more than anyone in Congress. So we've held TSA to task. We've had all kinds of meetings with them. We've had roundtable discussions with industry leaders, an attempt to try and drag them out of the Stone Age, proverbial Stone Ages, as far as screening equipment goes. And there's still an awful long way to go. But do you see some glimmers of hope on the horizon with some changes that have been made recently within TSA?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the task force, the innovation task force that was set up is really looking at some of these future technologies and making great progress in some of the areas that we're very interested in as well. And I would really like to see the work of that task force continuing, and with a lot of engagement with us as well, so that we can share experiences and help by looking globally at what everybody's doing and bring all of that information together. Because some of the future technologies, particularly with things like standoff screening, so that you could walk through a checkpoint without having to stop, that's really where we want to be. And through the work of airports and regulators and organizations like TSA, then we will be able to get there. But we need to push ahead with the R&D, and obviously that requires money. So unfortunately, it comes back to the bottom line again.
Yes, it does. I appreciate it. There's so much more to ask all of you, Mr. Cox. I suspect Ms. Watson-Coleman has some questions for you that I would have asked anyhow. So the chair now recognizes the ranking member, Mrs. Watson-Coleman, for 5 minutes for questions.
Before I engage in my questions, I ask that I get an opportunity to make some observations. I really appreciated the ones that you made with regard to the testimony that was offered.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It is really important that the three of you were here to give us your perspective. It is so important that we make sure that there's efficient and effective traveling. It's so important that we contribute to the economy with people who want to travel. It is so important that we recognize the significance of the people on the line, and recognize that because things have not happened that are bad, don't ignore the problems that exist as it relates to them. So, and the information with regard to technology and how we stand in relation to the rest of the world is really important. I think it speaks volumes to a couple of things. TSA needs stability. It needs it needs the access to the fees that are being diverted for other reasons, because that money can be used for purposes of improving technology, the newest, most innovative technology that is evidence-based and works, as well as supporting the people, the staff that is charged to doing this. So before I engage in my very short questions, I just want to ask unanimous consent that Representative Jackson Lee be allowed to sit and question the witnesses as well.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your indulgence. So I will start with Mr. Cox, because I don't want to disappoint my chairman. Mr. Cox, in the past, it was common for TSOs and TSA to revel in the fact that the agency was able to screen a certain amount of travelers within a certain amount of time. Following the leaked OIG report in 2015, which brought to light a number of TSA security gaps, TSA rightfully rechanneled its focus to effective screening. With the steadily increasing volume of travelers and the pressure to screen them in a certain amount of time, and I do hope that there is an increase in traveling, and I hope that this ban that we're trying to wrap our brain around right now is understood and applied appropriately so it doesn't decrease the appropriate travel. How has TSA worked to ensure that effective and efficient screening is of the utmost importance?
Thank you, Congresswoman. TSA has definitely refocused on the training. They were training for quick and fast to the most efficient mannerism to get the passengers through, but they realized they needed to be screening for quality, that teaching and training folks exactly what to look for. All of us go through airports, and it's pretty amazing. I see those screens, and I have no idea what I'm looking at, but these are trained professionals, a skillful workforce, and being able to focus directly on training. And I commend our previous administrator, Neffinger, for spending the time and resources to retrain TSOs and to do that. And obviously, that's a hardship, because if a person's in training, they're not directly on the job that day. And one thing I would point out, we are about 5,000 less transportation security officers today than we were several years ago. So we have less people doing a lot more screening.
With that was going to be my second question. There are about 40,000 now, right?
Correct.
And you said that's 5,000 less than we had.
We had right at 45,000 several, I would say, 3 or 4 years ago.
Given what you've experienced, and given what Mr. Dow has even expressed in terms of expectations of increased traveling, how many TSOs do you feel would be needed?
I wouldn't be the best person to ask, but certainly that 5,000 that's been lost, I believe, needs to be returned. The air traffic is much higher. Technology is improving, and we applaud and we want greater technology. Yes, the frequent traveler program, all those things come hand in hand, but still yet, we can never get rid of the human element. Yes. There is a person, even at the frequent traveler check lane, that has to be there. The human resources still have to exist with all of that.
Thank you. I know we've got some serious concerns with the fact that TSOs are not covered under Title V.
Correct.
I know that you recently ratified your second collective bargaining agreement with TSA. How is negotiating with TSA different from negotiating with other DHS agencies that are represented by your union?
TSOs do not have Merit System Protection Board rights as all other federal employees and most other agencies. There is not the ability to have a negotiated grievance procedure to resolve workplace disputes. There are very, very limited things that can be negotiated. Basically, we spend a lot of time talking about when you can wear a jacket and when you cannot wear a jacket, or when you can wear shorts or long pants. So those are very minimal things, but very important for the work. Border Patrol agents, ICE agents, CIS, all other Homeland Security employees, Coast Guard, many of those have Title V protections.
It's been noted that TSOs have the lowest just about the lowest morale in the workforce. And I would suspect you might align that concern with the fact that they don't have the same rights and privileges as other federal employees do?
That is correct. They don't have the same rights and privileges, nor are they on the GS pay scale. Their pay is less than most other federal employees, and so it's an entirely different employment system.
Does that impact the ability to recruit enough and to retain enough?
Yes, ma'am. The turnover in TSA is higher than many other government agencies.
I'm going to have some questions from Mrs. Brooks and Mr. Down. I will do it on the second round. So I thank you for your indulgence thus far. Thank you, Mr.
Ms.
Chairman.
Watson-Coleman, if you just have a few minutes of questions, we might try and do this in one round if you'd like to just go for a few minutes longer.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Brooks, as you observe, integrating innovative technology into the passenger screening process will help make airport security procedures more effective and more efficient. What are the biggest challenges to getting the state-of-the-art technologies into our airports as compared to the procurement processes within airports around the world? Is it the money?
Well,
Is it the lack of planning?
Well, money does come into it, of course. One of the things that I think really needs to be looked at is the time it takes for technology to get out of the lab and into the airports, the certification processes. There's a lot that can be done with that. You know, clearly the TSA has to certify equipment, and that's absolutely right. But that turnaround time is very important for getting things actually out into airports. And, you know, maybe there are opportunities to look at what's done in Europe with ECAC, for example, that certifies equipment, and maybe have some kind of recognition that if Europe's already certified something, then, you know, maybe there's a less rigorous process that can be done here. You know, maybe there's some reciprocal arrangement, because that really is critical to getting things there.
Does the instability of the leadership in TSA, whether or not there is indeed an alignment between a long-term plan, long-term needs, and long-term budgeting, does that affect the rolling out of technology that you see in use in other airports that's already evidence-based?
Well, I think probably the shifting emphasis between, you know, whether there's research and development as something seen as very critical and important, and the rollout of new technologies, yes, that probably does have an impact, given, you know, one administrator to the next may have very different views about how fast these things need to happen. We've certainly had some very good experiences with the previous administrator, Admiral Neffinger.
Thank you. My last question? Sure. Okay, thank you. This is actually for Mr. Dow and President Cox. According to media reports, airline crews have been caught up in the president's recent travel ban. Specifically, airline crew members from 7 countries referenced in the executive order are now prohibited from entering this country, despite having approved U.S. entry visas. Some crew members have been detained, and carriers have had to shift staff away from the U.S. routes to prevent additional crew members from being affected. According to the International Air Transportation Association, the executive order was issued without prior coordination, warning, causing confusion among both airlines and travelers. It also placed additional burdens on airlines to comply with unclear requirements, to bear implementation costs, and to face potential penalties for noncompliance. What does the botched rollout of the travel ban executive order say about the importance of DHS consulting and coordinating with partners like carriers, airports, and travel industry stakeholders and employees in the development implementation of the security policy? I'll start with you, Mr. Dow, and then ask you, Mr. Cox, to respond, and then I will say thank you to my chairman.
We respect and appreciate the President's concern for the safety of America. That said, we need to find a way to end the confusion and the chaos that it has created, and we urge them to get through this quickly, these 90 days, because there's a great deal of misunderstanding that was caused, and I think it's very important to have everybody in the loop as we work through these things. So we understand and respect the need for security, but we also need to make sure that the world knows clearly what we're doing.
I think there's been a great deal of confusion. Clearly, AFG proudly represents the National Border Patrol throughout the country. And the comments and feedback that I've had from those agents is basically confusion of not knowing exactly what to do at airports, and that has sort of focused resources away, particularly from our southern border, where we worry strongly about drug cartels and those that are into human trafficking and many things that are very, very harmful. We clearly, most people coming into airports have met the proper visa requirements and have the proper paperwork. We always want to prevent against anyone coming into this country to do harm to the American public.
Chairman Katko, let me just say that, you know, we think, when we think of our safety and security, we think of our intelligence community, our FBI, and places of that nature, and we wouldn't privatize them. With regard to travelers, I think that that's the same level of security we're expecting and hoping for. And while we can use the best technologies in the world, I believe that those who take an oath to uphold our Constitution and work as employees of our workforce are the ones that should be making sure that we're safe and secure at airports. Thank you with that. I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you, Ms. Watson-Coleman. And I will note, as a matter of practice with this committee, the ranking member will have more flexibility with respect to time moving forward. I'm unfortunate, given the growing list of people doing questions here today, we will not be able to grant all of you as much flexibility. So we ask you to stick as close as you can to the five-minute limit as you can. The chair now recognizes Mr. Higgins, a gentleman from Louisiana. First, I want to welcome you to Congress and welcome you to this committee. And Mr. Higgins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for Mr. Dow. Sir, if we could move to airport security overall, I'd like to ask you about your opinions regarding the vetting and supervision of airport employees that have regular access to aircraft and luggage and cargo. There's a great deal of emphasis being placed upon the screening of travelers, and those of us that fly regularly wonder, you know, what is the level of screening being given to the employees that have access to the aircraft that we're entering, and to our luggage and cargo to travel as well. And overall, just give us some feedback, please, on the vulnerabilities and weaknesses of perimeter security at United States airports.
Yes, sir. First of all, we believe that everyone who has access to the air transportation system has to be properly vetted and screened, and that's back of the house employee, it's my hotel talk, back of the airport employees, pilots, everyone has to do that. You asked a question also on how important it is to, last part of your question, I dropped it, I apologize.
Just your overall assessment of the vulnerabilities or weakness of airport perimeter security.
Yes, I'm glad that's a very important area, because as we've seen, a couple of problems that we have had around the world have been outside the screening area. And I think it's extremely important that we put measures in there, whether it be presence of security, security practices, but we have to be careful we don't move TSA out to the beginning of the highway getting to the airport, because so many airports are so difficult to get through. So we have to have systems, people have to know we're watching those areas, but perimeter security is important, but we do not want to move the checkpoint to the road approaching the airport, which would be a total disaster. So it's a high priority, and we've got to address it.
Yes, sir. I'm wondering what level of coordination the TSA has with airport police and to address these matters of the safety of the aircraft and the travelers.
Just as the ranking member said, of having everybody involved, I think it's very important that local police, airport police, and security and our Secret Service people all work in conjunction to put a net in your state. I've seen a tremendous amount of cooperation between the state police, the city police, and in New Orleans, which is very important. So I think it's important. It can be done. You can get everyone working together.
Thank you, sir. And generally speaking, nationwide, are you seeing that level of cooperation in other states?
It varies. You've seen one airport, but it's becoming more and more important, and all our airport directors have it on their radar that we need to look not only at the security checkpoint, but understand and have a plan in place for perimeter security.
Thank you, Mr. Dow.
Thank you,
Ms.
sir.
Brooks, Mr. Cox, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member of the subcommittee. It's really an honor and a privilege to have her join this committee that has really done great work and worked in a bipartisan manner over the course of the time I've been involved. And so we're looking forward to continuing that work. Mr. Dow, in your testimony, you discussed implementing improvements to the checkpoint experience. In your opinion, what are the most effective and pressing adjustments that should be made to the pre-check process in order to encourage greater participation among trusted populations without sacrificing the security of all the passengers?
A very good question, Mr. Payne. Thank you. On the pre-check process, number one, we've got to get more people in the program. We have millions of people who have been vetted very deeply from a secure standpoint. We should figure out how we can get those people in the program. The second thing, I can apply for a mortgage and get an answer in 40 seconds. We should be able to have people apply for pre-check and get a very quick answer going through all the security processes. If we can do that, that will help. I think we have to, as I said earlier, promote more. If I owned TSA, I would put a lot of dollars behind promoting and getting another 10 or 15 million in this program, and that in turn would raise over $1 billion. So we need to promote, we need to have a good process, we got to be able to sign people up, and it has to be a priority. It has not been a big enough priority, whether it be with Congress or a lot of people, to get people in this program. You and I are not going to blow up an airport. So bottom line, we should figure out how to get more of us in this program.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Brooks, what reasons can you give for the lack of innovation here in the States as opposed to other jurisdictions where you've seen this technology implemented? You know, we here in America like to pride ourselves on being on the cutting edge, and in so many instances, I'm finding that we're lacking in areas. What can you give me some context on why you think we are where we are?
Well, I think the innovation actually isn't lacking. It's there. It's happening in the labs. TSA is doing a lot of really good work and looking at new technologies. And some of the things that we're starting to see rolled out now in airports with for example, in Atlanta, is actually getting towards some of that innovation. But I think it comes to getting it out there more quickly. And again, it comes down to, there has to be adequate funding to get that technology tested, certified, and rolled out into the airports.
Mm-hmm. Well, I get concerned sometimes about, us trying to reinvent the wheel. I mean, if there's something, that's working in Heathrow, I mean, my pride isn't going to keep me from saying, well, hey, how are you doing that? How are you implementing that? I just don't understand, the lag time in finding technology that is moving us forward and advancing and, getting to the airports in a timely manner if it's working there.
I think the collaboration that we have now with TSA is critical, and I really hope that with the new administrator going forward that we continue that, because we are starting to exchange some very good information with TSA and have some very good discussions about the technology, the research, the trials, the processes that are happening, both in the US and in the rest of the world. So I think there's a lot we can learn from each other, and I really hope that continues going forward, because we've seen a big difference in the last couple of years. So.
Thank you. President Cox, it's good to have you here again. We respect the work of the men and women at TSA. The TSOs are really on the front line, and we have to make sure that we, some of us in Congress, make sure that the traveling public and people in this country understand the difficult work being on the front lines every single day that our TSOs are, and really raise their profile and respect in this country for the work that they do. 3,300 weapons that they found, and that's just firearms. On January 23rd, President Trump signed an executive order initiating a federal hiring freeze. TSOs are federal employees. Have you received any guidance from the administration on whether or not this hiring freeze will affect TSOs?
I have not, sir. It's our understanding that there is a hiring freeze for all of Homeland Security at this point. I may be wrong with that. It's changed by the moments, but it's our understanding there is a hiring freeze for TSA and other departments inside of Homeland Security.
Well, I think that some type of correspondence should go out to the administration in terms of maybe looking at that freeze in this area, making sure that the traveling public is safe, should not be something that's curtailed. You said you're down 5,000 TSOs.
Yes, sir.
As it
There is
is.
about 5,000 less than there was just several years ago.
Okay. Well, I really think that's something that needs to be addressed, and hopefully through this committee, we can do so. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome the new ranking member and the staff. It's great to be here. One of the things that concerns me generally is the fact that we're viewing this in the lens of terrorist attack, which we should, and people's safety personally. However, there's another target for these attacks, and that's our economies. And it's the economy of an industry. It's the economy of the countries that are affected by this. And so I want to thank Mr. Dow for the dialogue that the chairman and I participated in, and the close relationship with this committee. I think it's very important from an industry standpoint you do that. And President Cox, I've got to tell you, I fly a lot. And the attitude of the people on the front line that are there is extraordinary. The helpfulness, and I've really been impressed by that. It's a tough job. But I've seen definite, high level of helping people, even when they're perhaps doing some things that common sense would prevail against. But I just want to delve on a couple of issues in those lines quickly. Number one, Mr. Dow or Ms. Brooks, enhancing pre-check, we touched on it, but how have we come in terms of the airlines themselves being helpful? I mean, the idea of, for instance, being able to exchange maybe some frequent flyer miles in exchange for a pre-check status, if people want to make that trade-off. Is that something that's been explored? How are businesses that have people that work for them, are they stepping up more? Have you seen a trend to make sure their companies and their employees have pre-check paid for them by the companies? And what can we do to expand that, to a greater extent even?
Well, two things, Mr. King. Thank you for all your engagement in this issue. You've become an expert on this, so I appreciate it. You mentioned I'm going to touch on, you mentioned the economy. When September 11th happened, the air travel industry came to its knees in 45 minutes. The U.S. economy followed in about 30 days. The world economy followed in about 2 months. So the link between travel and economy is so clear. When you ask about TSA PreCheck, we would like to see all of those things happen. Some companies have stepped out and will pay for their employees. Google, some of the tech companies have done that. But we need to get these ability to use frequent flyer miles. There have been some experiments, and it's worked. Enterprise Rent-A-Car is doing that. We've
So
had,
that the people can make that trade-off if
so you
they
can make the
want.
trade-off. It doesn't matter how they get there. As long as we get more people in this program, it allows more TSO resources to look for the folks that we don't know a lot about. And so we've got to make it a high priority. And we've got.
There's one other area,
everything
I hate to
policy-
interrupt, my time's
possible.
going
Yes,
by.
sir.
There's one other area where they maybe could make a trade-off that would help, in my experience, I think, in anyone that travels. And that's, the extra charge for the baggage. I see so many, slow-ups as a result of people just struggling to get the extra bag on so they're not charged with it. Maybe there's something they could do with frequent flyer miles and the extra charge for baggage, too, because that does slow things down. And I think it makes security a little harder as well. Just a thought.
I wish someone from the airlines could speak with you also on that, so thank you.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Cox, one thing I'm worried about, we're talking about the freeze, and the freeze will have an effect because you're going to lose some good recruits that will give up. And when people see a freeze and they're already working in a tough job like that, they're going to quit, and you're going to lose some very valuable people along the lines. But also, I think training is as important as anything else. I've seen it in so many other areas. I've seen it in the major cities, with the UASI training and those funds, how cross-professionalization, training together, and at airports with soft targets now, more and more being a concern. That's what we saw in Istanbul, that's what we saw in Brussels, that's what we saw in Fort Lauderdale. That training is going to be more valuable, training with local police and the people that are there for airport security. Do you see a need for further funding for that training yourself with your personnel?
Yes, sir. There's clearly a need for more training, and I think you touched on it very nicely. There are more people that work in an airport than just the screening employees. There's the vendors, the airline employees, the passengers. There's lots of personnel in airports. They're almost a city unto themselves. You've got to have training for all those individuals that's working in those facilities every day. And to play on some things, the chair, Mr. Dow, and you have said, I think we're talking about infrastructure that would improve the economy because we get more people to travel, that we move them through faster, all these things that will help our economy. And I think investing in better equipment, investing in the human resources, all of that will do great things for our economy. So I'm excited to see Congress talk about improving the infrastructure.
Yeah, and I do think, I've seen some of the new technology myself, and that's not replacing people's jobs. That's being able to shift people
To other jobs.
to other jobs, which are important too. So I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keating. There being no more witnesses, we don't have time for another round because I have a hard stop in a short period of time. But let me ask you something just somewhat unconventional, but since we have a few minutes here, is there anything that any of you three witnesses wanted to say that you didn't have an opportunity to say briefly that we should have touched on, or something you think is important to note before we conclude?
I think one thing's important, too, is engage the airports. Many airports are in favor of SPP, some are not. And I think it's very important that TSA take a look at the main mission of security and keeping us safe, and then bring in the technology and the folks from the airports, because they can add on facilitation, on equipment, on canines. And I think we've got to have a better marriage of the folks that run the airports and TSA.
I couldn't agree more with that. And no better example of that was last summer when some administrative glitches within TSA helped contribute greatly to the wait lines at airports. And once they started talking more with the airlines and the airports, those lines were alleviated significantly, along with working collaboratively with the folks on the front lines. So you're absolutely right in that regard, and I thank you for noting that.
Mr. Chairman, can I have unanimous consent for one comment?
Absolutely.
No, thank you. I just want to point out, with the help of the committee here, we passed in the House just this week a bill that'll take the GAO study about looking at the uniqueness of the design of every airport into consideration with our safety plan. So we have moved forward as a committee, taking some of that advice. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
No, that's an excellent point. No need to apologize. I appreciate making it. Anyone else before we conclude?
Mr. Chairman, I have to say this with all honesty. I think particularly this subcommittee has a great chairman, a great ranking member.
I agree.
I know, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart, because you work together, you want to find solutions. It's easy to constantly identify problems. The American people are looking for solutions. Employees are looking for solutions. Government does lots of good things that helps this country operate and helps the private industry operate. So I am excited about this Congress and this subcommittee, and I will work with you, and AFGE works with the two of you in any way we can to find solutions to help our economy and keep us all safe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cox. I appreciate the kind words, and I think they're well earned by everyone on the committee, because we do try and dispense with party loyalties and to do the right things to keep our American public safe and keep this system humming, and also to make it better. And that's our job. And hopefully we can stand as an example of what others in Congress can do when they put down their swords and start working together. And I think it's important to do that. So, Ms. Brooks, before we wrap up, would you like to say anything?
Yes, just very briefly, thank you. I just wanted to underscore Mr. Dow's point that engagement with the airports, engagement with other industry parties is absolutely critical. And where we've seen the best results, I'm not just talking technology, but also people, human factors, screening checkpoints, perimeters, insider threat, all of that, it works best when there's strong collaboration between the industry and the regulators. So that would be probably my key message.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. I want to thank all the folks here today. When the situation permits itself, as a matter of course going forward, we will have a little more flexibility in how we conduct the hearings like we did today. I can't guarantee it's always going to be like that, but I will signal certainly to Ms. Watson-Coleman at the outset how we're going to be doing it. But, we have a structure we follow, but when we can deviate from the good of the order to get a more full hearing, we're going to do that if we can. So I'd like to thank the witnesses for their thoughtful testimony, and members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to Committee Rule 7C, the hearing record will be open for 10 days. Without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned. Thank you all.